Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. The season is over, guys. Finally, I would add, the season is over. We started with high hopes, talking about Champions League, talking about ending the season again in the top four. And Alasdair McKenzie, we didn't even come close to finishing in the top four, right? Incredible season. We're gonna do next week, so check our Twitter account in particular because we're gonna put out polls for you to vote. But it wasn't a great season. We're gonna talk about that. The last game of the season was probably one of the worst of the year, right?
Yeah, this won't quite be the end of season review show, but I think we'll end up naturally talking about the season as a whole quite a lot because that Sassuolo game does not merit a podcast to itself. I mean, we were both there. It was thankfully a great event, wasn't it? Because we had Sven Goran Eriksson in the stadium
Yeah.
before the match. We had Felipe Anderson being waved off after the match, and so there was a great atmosphere, big crowds. It was a good night, but the football itself was dreadful, and seeing the team being whistled off at halftime and at full time, yeah, kind of sums up what you've just said, that it's not exactly been a season we're going to remember for a very long time.
I mean, for someone who's not aware, Sassuolo was already relegated, and Ballardini picked a very experimental starting 11. There were a lot of subs playing. And yeah, you can agree that Cragno a couple of years ago was considered one of the best goalkeeper in Italy, but he didn't play the last 2 years pretty much. He was considered a bench. And a lot of Sassuolo players that started yesterday are bench players who was finally given an opportunity. So Lazio should have won that game easily. And it was one of the most boring game ever. It felt like they didn't want to play football.
Boring is the right word for it. I can't really think of anything else. I took my wife along, and it was she doesn't go to a lot of games, so I was almost apologizing afterwards because, like, okay, you do get dull games, but usually it's not like this. There was just nothing happening. To be honest, I said to you before we came on that I've just watched the highlights, and I was kind of surprised they managed to fill a couple of minutes with clips from the game. If you look at the highlights, it does look like there were, a few decent chances here and there, but it just didn't feel like it. Even the chances that felt like they happened almost by coincidence
Yeah.
rather than by the team, attacking or creating in a coherent way. And it was very strange because, like you said, Sassuolo have been relegated, experimental team, all the rest of it. But also, it's supposed to be your big end of season send off. There was something on the line for Lazio here because remember, we needed that 1 point in order to actually make sure we're in the Europa League next season and not in the Conference League. So it was just really strange and disappointing how flat that performance was because it hasn't been like that generally under Tudor.
Yeah.
And generally, his biggest success so far has been that he is able to get this team to avoid these kind of mental dips, but not last night.
And how strange was it? Because we had probably the biggest chance of the game after 3 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Hila, an incredible pass to his eye, who all alone in front of the goalkeeper missed a huge opportunity. And I was thinking, well, we started well. This is gonna be interesting. But that was pretty much it for the first half, right? We didn't create anything else after that. Well, no, Kamada had a huge chance where Canio made a good save. But yeah, apart from that, it was it.
It was funny because that the Hisai chance happened right in front of where I was sitting, and you could almost see like the panic on his face as he gets the ball one on one with the goalkeeper, and he's kind of like, "Oh my god, what am I supposed to do here?" He's so uncomfortable in that situation. Took far too long, hesitated, couldn't get it out of his feet. Yeah, I mean, like 1-1 draw, we can forget about that game pretty quickly. I don't think we've really learned anything new from it, particularly. I think what we have learned is that there's almost like a willingness from the Laziali to kind of just forget about this and move on now and start looking in front. There was a banner in the Curva Nord during the game that said, the 24-25 season, you have to win, basically. Kind of, intimating we'll accept this and get on with it, but on the basis that you're gonna be better next year, because we can't have this all over again.
But before moving on from Lazio Sassuolo, I think we have to talk about Tudor decisions. I mean, the starting 11, again, with his eyes starting, that was surprising. Gendouzi benched again. That's not a good sign. And even the substitution, I mean, we were playing dreadful. Why bring in Pedro only at, what was it, 89th minute of the game? Why wait so long? And why, for example, don't bring in Isaacsen or Luis Alberto or something like that? I mean, Castellano was dreadful yesterday. Why you didn't give Ciro more minutes? Ciro had the biggest chance in the second half. He was doing something compared to Castellanos. So I don't know. I trusted Maurizio Sarri, and I could see his point of view. But with Tudor, I'm a little bit surprised. Now it's nearly 2 months that he's there. We started playing with, a winger playing in the midfield. How many times did we see Felipe Anderson playing on the left, then Zaccagni, then Isaacsen? Now suddenly we're starting with Pellegrini Isai. Why? What's going on?
Well, yeah, it's the kind of the roulette table of Igor Tudor's selection, isn't it? It's always very difficult to predict who's going to start. But yeah, you're right about the substitutions. It took a long time for anything to change in a game where they clearly needed to change, and there wasn't any huge risk in doing so. Also, the fact that you've got Felipe Anderson there on the bench waiting, who is going to be the most motivated guy in the entire squad. Because you could say Tudor's left him on the bench because he knows he doesn't have him next season. Fine. But for now, what you need is to win this match. And Felipe Anderson, in front of a home crowd on a night that's basically dedicated to him, that he is the player there who's the most fired up to go out and perform. He has to be. And I think he was, because you saw him come on, and I thought he actually injected something into that. Again, I'm not saying he was at his absolute best, but he did bring something to that match. And there was a moment where he lost the ball around halfway, and he sprints back and makes the tackle to win the ball back, because you could see he was like, no, I'm not going to be responsible for giving away a goal on my final game. So I think I don't think he managed the motivation of the squad that well last night, because if you've got Alberto, being honoured by the fans, you've got Felipe Anderson saying goodbye, you've got guys there who are going to want to go out on a high, but they're not able to because they're not on the pitch.
Yeah, the Luis Alberto situation is weird. No celebration because, well, officially he's not leaving, right?
Yeah.
Claudio Lotito spoke this morning about that and said, well, he's doing everything on his own. If he wants to leave, he has to bring a team that offer the right amount of money. We know that Lazio wants something like 50 million euros from him. And if nobody comes, he has 4 years of contract. So he cannot say, hey, I'm leaving, goodbye. It's not the Felipe Anderson situation. But, and I wasn't able to check, I thought when Tudor made the last substitution, he ran to the locker room and then came back just for the celebration of Felipe Anderson, right?
Alberto did?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Well, I mean, this whole thing seems like it's going to be messy, and I'm not
Lionel Messi, eh? Messi.
Very good. Yeah, I just think the risk is that it becomes a bit of a saga and a soap opera that's going to play out very publicly. Knowing Luis Alberto, he's not going to be remaining silent if he's got something to say. Lotito certainly doesn't stay silent if he's got something to say. I think it's not what they need, is a kind of sideshow going on there around when and how and the terms on which he's going to be sold. And yeah, I don't think you want to risk a situation where you end up with an unhappy player in the squad next season because you've set the demands too high. I mean, this is the flip side of the Lotito bargaining position. Sometimes it's a thing that he's praised for because he isn't someone who just sells his best players every year. He will hold out for the value that he wants for players. But the flip side of that is that Lazio do continuously end up in situations where either you have these kind of big drawn-out sagas playing out publicly, or you lose players at the end of their contracts all the time because they know that that's the only way they're going to be able to leave, basically.
Yeah, and it's funny because last year we were talking about the summer transfer and said, this is going to be a very important summer transfer. We have to change a lot of players, etc. And 1 year later, we are pretty much in the same situation, right? We're talking about this selling a lot of players, signing youngster because this team is quite old, etc., etc. It looks like it's every summer pretty much the same.
Well, I know you want to talk about Tudor's comments as well. I mean, now is probably a good time, I guess, in terms of the squad and what's going to happen next season. And it does seem a bit very uncertain, really, around what the team's going to look like next season. The one good piece of news, I guess, in terms of Tudor's comments around this game was before the match, and the fact that he's gone and said that Kamada wants to stay and that they're going to get the contract done. I hope that's correct, and that he's not kind of gone too early with that.
Well, he didn't say they're going to get the contract done. They're going to talk about the contract. This is the positive sign is he wants to stay. But rumors are that he wants more money. So I don't know if Lotito's going to give him that money. We can definitely say that Kamada has been a key player of Tudor's squad. Tudor has been rotating a lot, which I can understand, but I don't think it's the right solution. But Kamada has been always playing, right? Trequartista or in front of a defense. Kamada has been a starting point, so I think it's vital to keep him. Otherwise, we're going to be in big trouble without him, with Luis Alberto leaving and with Gendouzi. So after the game, they asked Tudor, what about Gendouzi? Is he staying next season? And he said, I need to talk to the player before answering you, which is not a good sign, right, Alasdair?
No, and there's clearly something there, isn't there? Because it's been talked about since before he arrived, to be honest, this pre-existing relationship and whether that was going to work or not. I guess the fact that Gendouzi was so excited to work with Sarri to begin with, and then that's broken down. The fact that since Tudor's been in, Gendouzi's been in and out of the team, more out than in recent games. Yeah, and it's difficult. And I think Gendouzi is quite a high-profile one in terms of players who are a bit uncertain and might be considering their futures ahead of next season. But I don't think he's the only one because, I mean, you mentioned at the start how unpredictable the lineup was, and the fact that now we've got Pellegrini starting consecutive games, having just been completely out of the picture. Rovella, I mean, who knows what he's thinking? Suddenly he's starting games, but he was not getting anything. Isaacson started off being used a lot, and now we just don't see Isaacson anymore. There's quite a few players who will be a little bit confused about where they stand, probably based on these selections, because either they started off being important and no longer are, or vice versa.
Yeah, that's confusing. I mean, we have to say that the Rome press, it's bizarre, put it like that way, because they said that Tudor already didn't like Pellegrini, Lazzari, Rovella, etc. They were already on the market because Tudor said, I don't need them, they're bad. And now suddenly they start. So they are not on the market anymore. But now it's Isaacs and the other players that start before that are on the market, Cataldi, etc. And then Isai wanted to leave, but now he's starting, so he's staying. It's a little bit confusing. Going back to Gendouzi, my point of view is if a good offer comes which I'm not convinced it will, you have to sell the player. You have to. We saw Atalanta winning the Europe League, Alasdair. I think Lazio has to, in a certain way, duplicate what Atalanta is doing, right? You have a very good player, an interesting offer comes, you think about it, and you probably sell it if it's off the charts. If the offer is above the market, you sell it and you use that money to sign two youngsters, and you continue until you have a very good team, a very good squad, and you start making results. So if Gendouzi is not happy, which I'm not sure about that, but a Premier League club comes and offers 25, 30 million euros, I think you have to sit down and consider this offer, right?
Yeah, he's been under Sarri was definitely one of the best players. Under Tudor, clearly not as effective, and there's no point in keeping a player who's, whether we like him or not as a player and think he's good or not. If the coach doesn't like him, there's not much point in him being there.
Yeah.
And yeah, we need to bring in money somehow, and transfer sales are not a way that Lazio raises a lot of money because they're so reluctant to sell players, and we often end up in these situations where guys are being frozen out, or we end up with sending people on loan who look at our list at the moment of Maximiano and Akpagpro and Basic and Marcos Antonio and Cagliari. There's all these guys who we actually spent decent money on and had reasonably high hopes for in the last few years, who are just kind of spending time at other clubs, a lot of the time not being particularly effective, although this year Cancellieri is, and I think that's maybe something we'll get onto. But
yeah, Cancellieri had a terrific game yesterday. 1 goal, 1 assist. He finished the season playing a lot. I think he's close to a good amount of starting games with, let's not forget, Empoli fighting for relegation till the end. Still, he was picked up in the starting 11. And yesterday he had a terrific game. But I think overall he had a very good season. We saw he's not a number 9, right, Alasdair? But as a trequartista in Tudor's scheme, I think he makes sense. Now, I'm not saying he's the new Mbappe and he's going to change the team and be, a superstar. But, we have Pedro on the bench. Pedro is going to be a football legend. But going forward, I would love to have Cancellieri given an opportunity rather than Pedro, right? And playing a lot in Serie A with Empoli, I think he improved a lot.
Yeah, the reality is we've got a lot of spots to fill in the squad next season, right? So, if you've got someone returning after a full season in Serie A, I think he's only missed 2 games for Empoli this season. That doesn't mean that he's started every match. He hasn't started every match, but I think that it has been a really useful loan because A, he's actually playing regular football at the top level for a decent team, and B, looking at his season overall now, he's played in such a variety of roles. He's played on the right wing, he's played on the left wing, he's played as a kind of number 10, a second striker, he's played as a centre forward as well. And I think that is also very useful experience, and the fact that if he's coming into a Lazio team where he's kind of double trequartista system, I think he would be able to fit into that quite well because he's got experience playing all the way across that kind of line. And obviously he's worked under Tudor as well, so he kind of knows what to expect from him. I think you're right. I don't think we can expect him to come in and be the difference maker or be the alternative to a big summer signing. It's not that. It's just that realistically you need at least like 4 or 5 guys who can play in those roles for next season. And if we're losing Anderson and Alberto, there's 2 already gone.
And he's only 22. Let's not forget, he's turning 23 next February. And he already played 1 season in Serie A. He started a couple of games with Lazio. So I think he can be a very interesting sign. Again, we are not Real Madrid. So it's not that, hey, we are signing Haaland or Cancellieri. No. Cancellieri, Ciauna are very interesting signing. I don't think they are going to be the signing that are going to push Lazio in the top 4, but they're going to be interesting signing. I mean, better than having Pedro and this Luis Alberto, I think it makes sense to sign youngsters. And this leads me to the question, Alasdair. With Tudor, who joined Lazio, first game with Tudor was Lazio Juventus 1-0, so the 13th of March. Lazio lost just one game in Serie A, 2 overall, against Juventus and Roma. We drew away against Inter, etc. Are you convinced Tudor is the right manager for Lazio? Do you like him? Do you have concerns?
Well, I mean, what I would say is it's gone far better than I feared it would. When he first came in, I mean, I wasn't convinced. I thought the club had rushed the decision because they were caught by surprise by Sarri. I favoured the idea of getting someone in on a kind of caretaker basis until the end of the season to then have more time to decide on the right approach going forward. Which, you know, if you look at how many big coaches are out there looking for jobs at the moment, maybe was the way to do it. But he's changed a lot of people's minds. I think he's been really effective so far with a squad that is not suited to his style of football at all. So you have to give him a lot of credit. And the fact that, you know, I don't think it's necessarily fair to end the season booing this team because they have adapted well to his style of football and to being asked to play things in a different way. The performance against Sassuolo was dreadful. But in general, like you say, the results have been good. The problem is the overall result isn't good, which is getting knocked out in the semis of the cup that you hope to be in the final and finishing outside the Champions League places. So the two things that Tudor came in hoping to achieve, which is either, you know, cup final trophy or Champions League finish, we haven't got. But I think still it's exceeded expectations for me just because of that thing I've said about the squad not being right for his football. And he's managed to get them playing in a way that resembles a Tudor team.
Tudor said something about the Europe League. And we talked about this a lot, Alasdair, on this podcast. He said Europe League is a nice competition. We have to be ready for it. We have to be happy of playing the Europe League. But in the end of the day, Lazio pretty much played the Europe League like it was something he had to do and something they didn't care. Now, next season, there's going to be more money. Lazio is going to play at least 8 games. I hope this time we are going to try to... I don't say win it because it's going to be difficult, but at least do our best to go as deep as possible. I think the only time we reached the quarterfinals was with Petkovic, so not Italian manager. We did the same with Inzaghi with the Salzburg. But, you know, do you think with Tudor something will be different in the Europe League? We're going to play for it, really?
Can't believe you've mentioned Salzburg, honestly. I hope so. And I do think that the attitude has changed a bit in Italy in the last few years towards these competitions since the Conference League was introduced, particularly because if you see what that did for Roma, Mourinho was very clear about that from the start. You know, this is a club that is not winning trophies, that hasn't won anything for 14 years. This is important. Like, it's the third tier, it's not where we want to be, but going on a run and winning a cup is huge. And okay, maybe it's not like 3 million people out on the street huge, but that did a lot for that club. Fiorentina, see the way it galvanizes that fan base to be in 2 consecutive European finals. And that's just talking about the Conference League. I mean, Atalanta's run has been incredible. And that success is an unbelievable thing for that club, and the attention it's brought them, and the plaudits they've got across Europe for everything they've achieved there. I think what these things have done is they've shown the value to other Italian clubs of really going for it in the tournaments below the Champions League. They've shown that Italian teams can be really effective in those competitions because the strength of the league is good when you go a bit further down. I think Italy is lacking more at the absolute elite level. That's where it's not, Serie A teams aren't able to compete. But when you go further down than that, you've seen it. That's why Italy won the 5th Champions League place, is the overall coefficient score. And Lazio are one of those teams. If they chose to really go for it, I'm not saying they'll go and win the Europa League, but they can definitely do better than they have done in recent years, where it's been seen as this kind of annoyance that nobody even bothers turning up to the games for.
Yeah, this is the biggest issue. And I hope you're right. I mean, we have to play. And even money-wise is important. I mean, it's a lot of money for a club like Lazio. So I hope Tudor bring this new mentality to the team, to the fans, because as you were mentioning, it's really important for the fans. Alasdair, can we say the best thing of the game yesterday was the celebration, the party for Sven Goran Eriksson?
Definitely. Definitely.
It was a huge event. Finally, Sven Goran Eriksson coming to Rome. Lazio fans simply adores him. He has been a great manager. He won so many trophies with Lazio and was such a gentleman. And, it was good to see Lazio honoring one of the best manager ever to manage this club. And I thought it was a shame how Lazio played, though. I mean, players should have honored the manager as well with a nice game.
Well, yeah, I'm glad they did it all before kickoff. No, I mean, in case anyone hasn't seen it, Sven was back. There was a big, there were all sorts of banners across the whole stadium, and in his honor, he did a tour of the stadium where he walked around the pitch, waving at all the fans. He was presented with a plaque and all sorts of things. The trophies he'd won were laid out beside the pitch, which was nice. They had a video of all his seasons. I mean, it is incredible, like just every time now and then when you're reminded of that era and the team and the success they had, it's just ridiculous, ridiculous roll call of honors that he won. And then the Curva Nord's choreography was pretty special as well, which was they created the Lazio shirt from that season with Sven kind of across the front, like as if it was the sponsor. So yeah, I mean, it was really special, and obviously it's quite sad because he's not well, Sven.
Yeah,
which is part of the reason this is happening, I think. So it's great to see that kind of outpouring of love. It really was like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, he said that the energy will help him. We obviously hope so, because it would be good to have him again in Rome in the next season, and hopefully Lazio will play a much better game. And I don't know, Alasdair, it looks to me that we are back again in the same situation of last year, with the difference we're not in the Champions League compared to last season. And we are here talking about we need a striker. We needed last year as well, and we didn't find the right solution. We need to sign youngster because this team is growing old, and we are in the same situation this year. And we have a lot of players on loan coming back, and we need to sell them somehow. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to sign Kamenovic. I mean, what an incredible signing we made. And
like 80% of the listeners right now are going, who?
and this has been a weird season, because 5 spots for the Champions League, I don't know how many times it's going to happen. And Napoli failing so badly, it's another thing that I don't know is going to happen very often. So we had a huge opportunity this season, and we missed it completely. We can say that in Champions League we played well, probably above of our level, but in Serie A and Coppa Italia, I mean, let's not forget, we lost 2-0 against Juventus, a terrible Juventus. So yeah. I don't know. Talking about results, Tudor had great results, but not incredible performance. I'm not convinced about the new manager, to be honest with you.
No, even with a summer to get a more suitable team together, you still don't think he's going to be the guy.
Well, the thing is, probably he had problems with our best signings this summer, or Gendouzi and Rovella. And do we really believe that Lazio is going to sign 6-7 players this summer? I mean, uh, it would be very optimistic to think that, right?
I don't think it can be optimistic because I think it's completely essential. The one thing we already knew but was completely confirmed against Sassuolo was that we don't have the wing backs or the defenders to do this. We don't have them. Like it was obvious from the very start. But then when you're playing Hisai as a right wing back and putting him one-on-one with the keeper and that happens and Marisic is forced to play as a centre back, I mean, we just don't have enough players. So that has to be resolved one way or another. And, the midfield looks okay. I think he's finding decent solutions in that area. But certainly in attack, there needs to be refreshing. I think we got lucky with Mandas's rise this season that the goalkeeping situation looks really good now between the two of them, Provedel and Mandas. By the way, on the back of our little discussion last week, Provedel has been named in the provisional squad, as has Zaccagni. So 2 Laziali in there. We'll see if they make the final cut, but step one.
And Mandas has been called for the Greek national team for 2 friendly games.
Well, he deserves it. I mean, he's been such a bizarre success story. I was looking back at our transfers earlier on today from the start of the season and coming in from Crete, I think it was, for 1 million euros. I mean, yeah, absolutely no expectations when the season started. So that's been great. But yeah, there's a lot of work to be done there. And I think, to be honest with you, Vittorio, I think we can only really judge Tudor once he's got a team that he can use and that fits his system better. I think he's done. I agree with you. The football hasn't always been amazing, but if the football's not going to be great and the team's not going to adapt that quickly, you just want the results, and he has had good results. So I think we are also seeing a little bit already. I think when he first came in, I remember us talking about his reputation for being quite abrasive as a character and falling out with people and this kind of thing and not lasting very long at clubs. And we've already seen a little bit of that, I would say, in terms of...
Which is concerning.
So I don't know if this is going to be the new Simone Inzaghi era, of another kind of 7 years with a coach, but
yeah,
it could be interesting anyway.
Absolutely. Before we wrap it up, Maurizio Sarri finally spoke after he left Lazio. He said it was the best decision. He had to do something because this team was completely flat. He talked about especially the older players, the one we call Senatori here in Rome, were the one not responding to the manager, not performing. So he said that was the only solution he had to take, and that he was very delusional from the summer transfer. He said that maybe that affected the players because he was asking for different players, but Lotito made different decisions. Again, we talked about this in our podcast. We said that Lazio needed youngster rather than Berardi and Zielinski, and signing Berardi and Zielinski pretty much would have mean, okay, we signed those 2 players and that's it, because Lazio didn't have that much money. But seeing how Lazio performed, do you think signing Berardi instead of Isaacsen, etc., and Zielinski instead of Gendouzi would have been the right decision? Would have Lazio performed much better than they did this season?
Probably. Yeah, I mean, Look at Berardi and Zielinski's seasons. They've been a waste of time, basically. I mean, poor Berardi's injured himself, obviously, but it's not as if, I mean, what's he doing at Sassuolo all this time? I think he's kind of wasted his time a little bit, and Zielinski's spent the entire season kind of willy-wonty, what's the future hold, and he's not really been able to concentrate on his football. So, yeah, I mean, those are two brilliant Serie A players who I think we would have absolutely increased the quality of the Lazio team had they moved. But there's no point wasting time complaining about that. I think, Sarri's honesty, you've always got to respect. He is a very, very honest guy. He says exactly what he thinks. And in this occasion really backs up what he says. Before he resigned, he had said several times, if I get to the point where I think I'm the problem, I'll walk away. And it always sounded a bit more like a kind of veiled threat than anything else, but he meant it because he clearly reached that point where he thought, I can't do anymore, so I'm off. And he did it. But it was interesting what he said about not being able to hide his disappointment.
Yeah,
with the transfer, because that is a problem. If the players who have just arrived and they're full of excitement then start to get the feeling that they're not actually welcome, or the ones who were wanted in the first place, that must be quite difficult.
Yeah. Before we wrap it up, tomorrow, if you're listening on Monday to this podcast, there is the derby, the Primavera derby. It's going to be, I think, the quarterfinals of the playoff. Lazio have beaten, Lazio have draw against Milan, but as Lazio finished third and Milan fifth, we got through the stage. And we're going to play against Roma in, let me check if it's semi-final or not, at Viola Park, so in Florence. So it's going to be a very difficult game. Roma is a very good team. The Roma Primavera is a very good team. On the other hand, Lazio has been promoted last year from the Primavera, from the Serie B. So it's been a surprise to have Lazio going so far. I mean, it's going to be interesting, right, Alasdair? We won the first derby, so this is encouraging. But Roma is a very good team, so it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely encouraging. I think no matter what happens, because like you say, the fact they've only just come up from the second division and now they're in the mix, that's already positive. It's not been an area of Lazio that has been particularly positive in recent years, the Primavera. And when we're having all these discussions about transfer markets and all that, I mean, it just helps so much if you're a team who can actually produce talent. And Lazio have not been that team for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many of these players are realistically going to make that jump. When I've asked you about this before, you've not been convinced. Have you changed your mind as well?
Well, before it's semi-final, not quarterfinals. A Lazio midfielder, Sardo, has received the prize as best midfielder of the Primavera, which is surprising for me, at least. Everybody talking about Sana Fernandez, who scored another beauty against AC Milan. He's a great player, but I'm not sure physically he's big enough for the Serie A. It looks like a little bit of Raul Moro, more skilled player, more quality, but physically he's very tiny, so I'm not sure. There are some players interesting, but I'm not sure about that. But we're going to see. Tudor mentioned that. He said that he's going to bring probably some Primavera to Alonso, but this happens every single year. Then they simply don't play. I mean, this season, no Primavera player played one single minute in the first squad. So this is not a good sign, right?
No, exactly. And I think the physicality thing you're talking about is probably a particular concern with Tudor, because we know how much he rates physicality, and the fact that even someone like Nicolo Rovella, who's, a smaller player, but does look at least like a professional footballer. I mean, he himself has had problems getting into the team because of a supposed lack of muscle. The other thing is the women's team, we should mention, who have been promoted from Serie B, who won Serie B, I believe.
Yeah. So, 2 weeks ago.
So yeah, there's good things happening around the club. At least if the men's first team are failing, then other teams are doing well.
Yeah, you're right. And the rugby team is playing the final next weekend. And if they win, they're going to be promoted in the elite. So you can follow another rugby team, Alasdair.
There you go. Yeah. Well, they've produced quite a few of the Italy players, actually, the Lazio rugby team.
Yeah, and it's the oldest rugby team in Italy, 1927.
Yeah, they played in the first ever Italian rugby match, I think.
Yep.
So there you go, the little stat for listeners who may not have known about. I didn't expect us to end talking about the Lazio rugby team. But there we go.
Big surprise, big surprise. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Always remember to rate and review the podcast. Please support us at patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Membership starts at $2 a month, and Alasdair is going to put out this week polls for the special episode we're going to record next Monday. So follow us on X just to vote and tell us what you think about our polls. And we're going to be back next Monday. Thanks again, Alasdair.
Cheers.